Alright, so this at least boots to kickstart. So today in the lab we're looking at the Amiga 3000. This was a recent eBay purchase and is going to be my next target for getting all restored. And I didn't really need another Amiga. Of course, I don't really need any Amigas. But I've always been really fascinated by the Amiga 3000. First, it just has a very striking visual design. And then also, this really is the moment where Commodore starts to think about what a professional grade Amiga would actually look like. Yes, there was the 2000 before, but really the 2000, the 500, they were just iterations on the 1000 design. The Amiga 3000 is the first Amiga that really could be considered a workstation class machine. And in fact, they were sold as Unix workstations for a period of their lifetime. And there was even talks between Amiga and Sun Microsystems to have Sun sell Amiga 3000s, rebadged as Sun machines of course, but as Unix workstations for high-end computing. Now the Amiga 3000 was controversial when it first came out, and it's still a little controversial today. In fact, I was at VCF East either this year or last year, and they had a Commodore panel with a bunch of ex-Commodore employees, and they got a little roasted about the Amiga 3000.
Two regrets about that case. One, I screwed up and did not make sure a toaster fit in it. So that's one. And the other one was the zip RAM. I don't know if you remember that, but yeah, I'm sorry.
I heard some groaning out there. Oh, boy.
And the reason for this is if you just compare it to the 2000 on a very shallow metric, it can kind of be seen as a downstep, right? It's not as expandable as the 2000. It doesn't have as many Zorro slots. And the small case that it's packaged in really is a heat problem. That being said, even though this machine is controversial for some, I still am a big fan of just the design and the look of it. And I want to restore this back to close to its original state. This one's not going to get all the super upgrades that I put in the 4000. And that's not just because I am decidedly out of money. So anyhow, let's get started on this project. And of course the first thing to do, and the first thing to do for any big box Amiga, is to check the clock battery. Alright, let's check out the battery. This is going to be the kind of make or break thing for this Amiga 3000. The fact that it boots bodes pretty well to this being salvageable, but this little bugger right here, the NiCad battery, is what's caused the death of a lot of Amigas over the years. So let's take a look at this. So I've removed the board that was in there, which happened to be a Retina board, one of the very early Amiga graphics cards. And let's get real zoomed in here on this battery. And really doesn't look so bad. Not so much in the way of corruption, but there's a little bit we can see right in here. We can see some green, so that's evidence that there is some kind of corruption going on from either a light leakage or something like that. However, given the age of this machine and the fact that this is likely the original battery, this is really good. Most machines of this vintage that still have the original battery in them are really messed up. So I got super fortunate here with this this one, that the damage seems to be so light, and also the fact that it's still booting. So let's clip this guy out of here, and then we'll start seeing if we can disassemble this and see if anything else needs attention. We've got this destroyer of Amigas removed. Just cut it out with my snips here, and we can start to see underneath it that while there is some damage, it's really not so bad. And I wish I had a little bit more of a macro lens on this camera, but we can see some corrosion here and here. But like I said, because the machine still boots, and all of this seems to be just confined to some of these diodes and resistors around here, and some of these resistors around here. It doesn't seem to have affected the Denise chip up here, or I believe this is Paula. I'm not sure though, right here. So overall, very, very fortunate with the nature and extent of this leak. So in order to clean this up, I'm using a little bit of vinegar, and I'm going to kind of gently dab that around the areas where there has been some corrosion. And contrary to popular sayings, we talk about battery acid. This component that comes out of this is actually a base, so we use vinegar to neutralize it. Vinegar being acidic, right? If you remember your chemistry. So we're going to kind of dab this on the affected areas, and then in a bit, after we let this kind of soak for a little while, we'll come back and clean it off with alcohol. So this cleaned up relatively well with vinegar and then isopropyl alcohol, and good enough at least for the time being. I'm going to get this board sent off to Amiga of Rochester, which is my preferred repair place here on the east coast of the US, and here clean the board and get the caps replaced and all of that kind of stuff. Even after all that cleaning, it still boots, and in fact, I've been running through memory tests here. So now that I've got the battery out, I want to run some tests against this Amiga to see if anything else is wrong, if anything else needs to be repaired, any kind of obvious problems. And my favorite thing to do that with is this Amiga Test Kit. I'll provide a link to it, but it's a really handy ADF that can test almost every subsystem of the Amiga. Notable exception being the hard drive, but I have other ways to test that. So first is the memory. We can test all the different memory regions. This basically has a couple of different tests, but they're all variations of write a pattern to memory, read it back out, make sure that the memory didn't get corrupted in the meantime. I've let this run for hours with no errors, so I think we're pretty good on the installed memory on this machine. Next is the keyboard. This is really handy because you can test all of your keys. This machine comes with the original keyboard. What I've come to find out is basically every big box Amiga past the late Amiga 3000 era uses the exact same keyboard. It may have different logoing on it up at the top, but internally they use the same Mitsumi switches and are functionally equivalent. Now I already have a video where I've restored my Amiga 3000D keyboard, so I'm not sure if I'll do a restore on this keyboard, but it does need a little bit of work. The return key's a bit sticky, although really that's it. Otherwise it seems to work pretty well. I'm hoping just a nice thorough clean will bring this back up to fully functioning. Next up is the floppy drive, and this is where I think we're going to start to see some problems. I've cleaned these floppy drives using alcohol wipes and one of these old test discs here, but the F0 still seems to have some problems. So if I do a read test on this, which is F6, generally this seems to work fine until we get to the upper cylinders of the disk, and then it fails. Let's see if I can capture that on video. And now we're seeing bad reads on the upper cylinders. I don't know what's going on here. I'm going to have to dig in and look at it. Although my suspicion is that it might be some lubrication when the heads are moving back and forward. Because every time I run this test, it does a little bit better, which indicates to me that maybe that's some stiff grease that's loosening up. I don't know. We'll see. Luckily I have another one of these drives that I can pop in here that'll at least get us going while we diagnose what's wrong with this drive. Next, we can test the controller ports. And my mouse works good, my joystick works good, which is all great. Now this Amiga comes with the original mouse, and this kind of mouse style is called a pregnant mouse versus the older square design, which is called a tank mouse. And this mouse right here really feels like it's new. And this machine also came with a tank mouse, so part of me wonders if the old owner didn't like these pregnant mice here and preferred a tank mouse and just never used this. Don't know, maybe we'll never know, but I can tell you this mouse feels basically brand new. Now there was at the time when it was released a lot of, I would say, controversy around whether it was comfortable or not. So that could be. Next we can test the audio. That seems okay. I've tested all the different channels and filters and it sounds, at least to my ears, okay. We've got some video tests that we can do. Different checkerboards and all that, and these look okay. Might need to be some adjustment. Now, what's interesting about the Amiga 3000 is it has a built-in scan doubler and flicker fix, a special chip called the Amber. So these are actually being scan doubled and flicker fixed on board and outputted to VGA. I should probably redo this test with the native Amiga video just to make sure there's no problems there. But the fact that this is coming through pretty clear indicates that the Amber chip is working great. Next, there's tests for the CIAs. There are 2 CIAs in every Amiga, and they handle a whole bunch of different input-output functions. And all the tests here pass, so that's great. Real-time clock, it detects it, but of course the date is wrong. And the date's wrong because we ripped the battery out. So anytime we reset this machine, it's going to reset back to a date sometime in the 70s. If I set the date, though, which I will set this to 1998, if I reboot this Amiga without powering it off, we should still see the same date. And that would indicate that the real-time clock is working. So let's see if that's the case. And we see the same date. So that means the real-time clock is working. And we just need to replace the battery. We don't need to do any other maintenance on that. Lastly, these are the tests that I can't do because they require a dongle to do the tests. And these are tests for the serial and parallel ports. Unfortunately, I can't do these, so... Anyhow, running through this battery of tests, with the exception of the floppy drive, this Amiga looks to be working great. So now I can move on to the next step, which is getting it disassembled, testing the hard drive, which I think will be dead, and getting an OS up and running on it. And that will allow me to test more advanced things, like say throwing in a Zorro card and making sure that works, and things of that nature. Now, one thing that I will have to investigate a little bit is the LEDs don't seem to work. So there should be a power and a disc LED. Neither of them are illuminating. Don't know why. We'll look into it. So this Amiga 3000 passes almost every test that I can throw at it. Now, the floppy drive I haven't been able to fix yet, but by the magic of having 2 of them, I was able to move past that, because this drive that I pulled out of another Amiga works just fine. Now the hard drive that was originally in this thing, which is an old Quantum drive, was of course dead as a doornail. However, put a blue SCSI in here and it seems to be working fine. And I was even able to put in an Xsurf card and test the network. And so we now have Amiga OS 2 running successfully on this machine. Version 2 of Amiga OS is a little weird. It's very, I can tell it's very transitional, and back in the day, I actually skipped over this version. I had 1.3 Amigas and then went directly into 3.1. Just that was my upgrade path. Now, normal Amiga modes work great, and they get scan doubled and flicker fixed by the Amber chip without any noticeable video issues. Although as this machine runs longer, I start to see some artifacting, and that's fairly normal because of the heat that this generates. Amiga 3000 really needed better cooling, but it is what it is. However, the Amiga 3000 also boasted what were called productivity modes. These aren't Amiga native video modes that are scan doubled and flicker fixed. These are actually VGA modes that are directly output by the Amiga chipset. Very similar to the double modes that you see in AGA chipsets. If I try and use one of these modes, I get very strange video output. Like this is decidedly not right. And I tested this both on this LCD panel that I have and also a traditional CRT, and I get the same effect. So there's something wrong here, and I don't know immediately what it is. And I don't get any good hits on the internet about what this is. However, this seems to be the only video mode that is affected by this. So it's of a lower priority to try and figure out what's going on here. Like I say, I don't know. It's very strange. And I don't have any other ECS Amigas to test this against, because maybe this is just how it's supposed to be, right? I have AGA Amigas, which also support this productivity mode, and they work fine. And then I have original chipset machines like the early Amiga 2000 that I have and the Amiga 1000. They don't support this mode without some upgrades. So I don't know. But if I move it back to an Amiga native mode, NTSC works great. The last thing not working with this Amiga is the LED lights. And they're on this little printed circuit panel here. But if I move them around a little bit, you can see that they work. So those are just loose solder joints. And that should be relatively easy to fix. Throw some new solder on there and it should be good to go. If it turns out that I can't repair them, for example, I haven't been able to get the hard drive light to turn on, then there are replacements for this component that I can buy. People have made new PCBs for it. Don't really want to do that though, so we'll try getting it all soldered up. So this Amiga 3000 is working with some issues. And that's a great thing. So this is not a total lost case, but it also has enough to work on that might make some interesting videos on it. So next time we'll tear down this thing completely, because I'm going to send the boards to get ultrasonically cleaned, and we'll go through kind of a tour of tearing down this Amiga 3000 while I do that. So thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.